Welcome back to Normal Island Live. I'm your host, Lewis Aaron, and I am late. Why am I late? Because I work full time, and you should know by now that every time it's a Lewis show, it's probably going to be late. So, guys, I am sorry. We're working on it. I will get better, I promise. But today I am joined by the wonderful Josh White, who is the UK editor of The Battleground and has contributed towards the New Statesman, Counterpoint, Morning Star. Lots of things, lots of contributions. Hello, Josh. How's it going?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Josh, we're going to be talking about lots of stories today. So, with those stories that we're going to be discussing, we firstly have a juicy story about the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, is accused of misconduct. And is it a smear campaign against him? We will find out. Transgender people across the UK are being refused medication from their doctors. Ben Shapiro debates Liberal college students. How fun. And Keir Starmer says that those with assets are not working people. So who's gonna get taxed? But we'll quickly go to our first story. Now, this is a interesting one. So an account has appeared on X, formerly known as Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I can't ever not calling it Twitter. I don't know why you changed the name. It's called ICC Leaks. The account was only created this month, and immediately it started leaking information about the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan about allegations of sexual harassment. So the first post actually appears on October 17th with some generic information about allegations trying to frame him as a powerful man abusing his power. Then more information is released in the subsequent days. On October 19th, the Daily Mail then writes an article on the same issue, but their source is not X. It is a report from officials, a body called the Independent Oversight Mechanism, the IOM, which probes misconduct allegations at the court. And the alleged victim was quizzed, and that's what the Daily Mail say, but the person decided not to make a formal complaint. That's what was officially stated. But as the report wasn't actually released until October 19th, the account that started tweeting days before, it does seem likely that the user does actually have access to files that were actually hacked. So there are many bad actors who would benefit from hacking information from the ICC. But as we've previously discussed, The Guardian did reveal in an investigation in May this year titled Spying, Hacking and Intimidation, Israel's 9-year war on the ICC exposed, which revealed that the country deployed its intelligence agencies to surveil, hack, pressure, smear and allegedly threaten senior ICC staff in an effort to derail the court's inquiries. So, obviously, at this point, we can only speculate that it could be Israel because I want to be very clear. There is no actual proof that, as it stands, that this specific leak on the ICC Leaks account on Twitter is in fact Israel. But one thing that did weirdly stand out to me is that nobody else has reported on this at all. This is an exclusive from Turn Left. Is that the account ICC Leaks, which only has around 200 followers, by the way, a tiny account, somehow gained very little traction on its first post. But on its second post, Elon Musk, of all people, managed to find it and boost the post. I just don't get it. A tiny, tiny little account. How did he find it? How did he boost it? It doesn't really make any sense to me, but I am not into conspiracies. I have nothing further to say on this, but it's very odd how such a small, tiny account managed to get the attention of Elon Musk, of all people, which helped get this story into the mainstream. So, obviously, we know that Karim Khan is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and was also seeking arrest warrants for the Hamas leaders too, but they have now all been killed. So, in the last few days, we have had multiple right-wing and pro-Israel outlets screaming about this with all of their might. We had the Wall Street Journal editorial opinion smearing him as anti-Israel and noted the left domination of international legal circles, and even suggested that Khan may have attempted to divert the attention of his sexual harassment allegations made against him a few weeks earlier by bringing charges against Israeli leaders, which is wild. We had Senator Lindsey Graham demand that the ICC reveal details of the probe, and then we had Ynet, an Israeli media outlet, declaring that the warrants for Israeli leaders is a smokescreen for the ICC prosecutor's sex scandal. Now, AP News, who are, somewhat respectable, I think they do good reporting, have actually interviewed sources at the ICC. What we know at this point is that there was an investigation. It lasted 5 days, and the alleged victim did not want to pursue a formal complaint. And her allegations, according to those sources at the ICC, include some horrific behavior, potentially from Karim Khan, including physical sexual assault. I will never ever downplay alleged victims' experiences. And even under these circumstances, I will not speculate whether this is all made up as a smear campaign by Israeli intelligence to discredit the ICC and Karim Khan. But two things can be true at the same time. It could be true that Karim Khan is guilty and has behaved inappropriately and should be investigated, but it can also be true that an actor, a very bad actor like Israel, could have had a hand in this to weaken the ICC, weaken Karim Khan, and discredit any possible arrest warrants issued by the ICC. Now, Josh, what are your thoughts on this? Is my speculation too conspiratorial? What do you think it means for the ICC, Karim Khan, and the possible arrest warrant?
I think it's fair to raise these questions. I'm glad that you pulled back at the end, saying that we shouldn't downplay the severity of the allegations, and we shouldn't say write it all off as simply a conspiracy, because we really don't know at this point. Although what we do know is very suggestive. Let's put it that way. You could say that it's, even if there isn't a conspiracy, which I'm a skeptic when it comes to this kind of talk, frankly. Even if there isn't, it's obvious that the pro-Israel right is exploiting the situation. It's obvious that certain political actors like Musk are happy to exploit this and highlight this on Twitter, now X, unfortunately. And it's very clear who is benefiting from this. So you can talk about this in a non-conspiratorial way, I think. This doesn't have to be the monopoly of conspiracist cranks. I'm always trying to be scientific and skeptical in these situations, because again, we've had past stories like this, right? I mean, the one that comes to mind, a much more extreme case, would be Julian Assange, with allegations raised in Sweden. He claimed at the time it was a ruse to get him to Sweden to then extradite him to the US. Many people at the time, many liberals, claimed that was nonsense and he was just trying to avoid rape allegations. Of course, he then ended up stuck in the embassy for, a decade or so. And then it turned out that the US was after him all along. So...
Yeah, and I think... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so even if... Let's assume the allegations are true, for sake of argument, it's still the case that this suits Netanyahu's government extremely well.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think as well, like in terms of conspiracy, I don't like to engage in actual conspiracy because I think that's too much of a problem, especially it's not obviously just exclusive to the right, but it's pretty prominent on the right now. Conspiracy requires a level of faith where you can take some evidence, some circumstances, and put that all together, not find actual proof, but then jump using faith to the conclusion, right? And obviously that is a bit of what this story is about. Like, obviously, because we know The Guardian did reveal, working with other multiple media outlets as well, that the ICC have been hacking, they have been spying. Even one of the claims in that investigation originally, because we covered that investigation just a few weeks ago, was that they actually met up with the former ICC prosecutor. It was the former head of Mossad, I cannot remember his name, and actually showed her transcripts of phone calls of her husband. And use that to allegedly threaten her. We'll use the word allegedly because it is a Guardian report based on an investigation of sources. So I think it is easy to make that jump. But I think that's the difference as well. It's that caveat that we need to be mindful that all of these things could be true. There could be no conspiracy, and it could just be convenient for everyone. This could be convenient for Israel. This could be convenient for other people as well, like Russia. There are multiple countries and multiple leaders that Karim Khan is currently going after. And this could maybe, who knows, build up to a point where he simply has to resign. He's only 3 years into his term. He's got another 7 left. It's a 10-year term. And also as well, this I didn't actually mention this earlier, as it is a part of the story. It was revealed just a few hours ago that an ICC judge has been replaced due to medical issues. So, on top of Karim Khan being accused of this, which could potentially interrupt and disrupt the arrest warrants against Israel, we now have another judge who is leaving the bench and being replaced, which is also then going to further delay the arrest warrants. But I'm just curious, though, do you think if these allegations build up enough, it could potentially discredit him as a person because he's simply being accused by the Wall Street Journal, by Israeli media, of creating a smokescreen to hide his own allegations with these arrest warrants by going after Israel? What do you think of that?
I think if there's a groundswell of allegations and different things coming out, it could hurt him massively. It could destroy his reputation in his career, yes. And that could, that could ultimately lead to his resignation. Will it completely derail the proceedings for the Israeli case? Temporarily, I think that's possible, but it's not going away. And even if this is something that has been quote unquote instigated or say has been brought forward for opportunistic reasons to say derail the case, it's not going to go away because the charges are so serious, and ultimately the war in Gaza isn't going away. So it would be a temporary victory if that's what's going on, but not a long term one.
I will be curious to see like how long this actually now takes with all these added delays on top of the court to finally issue an arrest warrant. It is obviously concerning because issuing that arrest warrant, if they are deemed to be valid and there is enough evidence to issue those arrest warrants, which could halt, Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Yoav Gallant in their, in their genocidal tirade that they're going on right now. I am just upset that again there is another delay, another stump in the road on this journey that we've been waiting so long for. Because what I know from the history of the ICC is that those arrest warrants would have come out by now if it was any other case, and there's just been delay after delay after delay, and every day we're going by now, and more people are dying. We have obviously the absolute carnage right now that's going on in northern Gaza. We have what's going on in Lebanon. And I can only imagine that the only thing that could potentially at this point make Israel pause is those arrest warrants. And now there's another delay. And now there's a level of discreditation towards the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan. And I just don't know where this is going. I'm just curious though, like, if we were to entertain the conspiracy for a second, just out of curiosity, if Israel were found to be hacking into the ICC, as the Guardian investigation claims, and these leaks were perhaps done by Israel, would you even expect at this point any actual backlash at all from the international community? Or would it just be another slap on the hand and off you go, Israel?
Unfortunately, probably more the latter. I'd expect some temporary outrage. It would you'd probably see a lot of headlines about it for a few weeks, maybe. But unfortunately, the so-called international community, as we know, is completely narrowed to certain interests and world powers, right? So most of the world don't count as the international community. The international community is unfortunately the US and its friends. And we know where the US stands on these matters. They will criticize Israel here and there, at least this administration will, but ultimately just keep funneling in arms, providing intelligence and logistics, and even providing backup if necessary for all manner of crimes. So it looks very doubtful.
It does. It really, really does. I imagine if it did come out that this was Israel, it would just be a simple slap on the hand and off you go again. It just looks like at this point, not to be pessimistic, that nothing is going to slow down Israel at this point. So we will have to see what happens. I will jump over to our next story, but I do want to quickly note that it was reported a few weeks ago that the hacking and spying was being investigated by Dutch prosecutors in the Netherlands. So hopefully at some point something may come out of it. And if they do find Israel guilty of doing anything, that will definitely make the headlines. But we'll probably have to wait a very, very long time for that investigation to be complete. Now, on to our next story. There has been a very notable rise in the reports of trans people being denied access to hormone replacement therapy, or HRT for short. So, Transactual has heard from 215 trans adults across the UK who have had their HRT prescriptions rejected by their GPs, an action that essentially forces medical detransition. So this issue is not new, and it continues a troubling trend where some GPs refuse to support trans people and patients despite the NHS's obligation to provide transgender healthcare. The spike appears to be linked to updated guidance released in April 2024, and Transactual demand that further action must be taken to ensure that rogue GPs stop interfering with essential medications by enforcing the requirement to follow up prescriptions to have to come from gender clinics. None of these refusals were due to medical safety or concerns from the GPs. They openly admitted their actions stemmed from personal beliefs. So, this indicates that transphobic GPs, particularly in England, feel empowered to deny patients critical medication due to their own prejudice. What world are we living in? I don't know. Among these people denied HRT by their GPs in the last year, more than a quarter of them have been prescribed medication by an NHS gender clinic. Half of these individuals had been on HRT for over 5 years. These are not new patients who are trying to get medication. I saw even a post on Reddit from a person who has been on HRT for 17 years, and they got denied by their GP. Alarmingly, though, 8 respondents were denied HRT even though they had undergone surgeries that made them reliant on it for hormonal balances. This denial puts them at severe risk. So, once again, this amounts to GPs independently attempting to force medical detransition without any oversight or justification, and these GPs must be held accountable for the harm and discrimination they are inflicting. The most common excuse GPs gave for this dangerous behavior was a lack of training or competence in prescribing HRT. This highlights the impact of the updated guidance. It is unacceptable to harm patients for this reason, especially given the relative simplicity of the GP's role in monitoring the blood work of trans people on HRT. It's very simple. It's very easy. You don't need to be an expert for this. GPs must receive training to provide this essential service as a priority because there should be. Oops, sorry, my notes have crashed in front of me. Oops, sorry. They should be clearly responsible for ensuring continuity. Guys, we're not having a good day with the words. They're not making sense. Currently, no one in the NHS is taking responsibility for preventing the forced medical detransition of trans individuals. The impact of these refusals and the conversations that follow sends literal shockwaves through the UK trans community. Many now fearing that talking to their doctors, sharing information, or attending checkups, like they don't want to go, they don't want to see their doctors. The mental health toll on a community that already faces high levels of discrimination and distrust in the medical system, as shown in the Trans Lives Matter survey, it can't be overstated how serious this is. Josh, I can't believe this is where we're at in 2024. Even in some conservative states in America, they haven't gone this far. So where are we now? What are your thoughts on this? Because I'm pretty pissed off about this, to be honest.
It's very disturbing. Yeah, it is very disturbing, and it is a part of a systemic kind of shift that we've had over the last couple of years. As part of a few years really, part of a generalised backlash against trans rights in the UK, and also in a broader sense around LGBT rights and issues, actually, in terms of narratives, in terms of political discussion. But I think this is probably more directly connected to the CAS review and its kind of impact. Not least in terms of the kind of restrictions that have been introduced by the previous Conservative government and intensified by the Labour government, but also like the kind of cultural shift that it represents. Although if you actually read the CAS review, it's a lot more kind of ambiguous about certain things than the actual politicians who take it and use it as a weapon. I recommend everyone reading it with a critical eye, actually. But looking at this is why so many trans people turn to private providers, which is not ideal. It really isn't ideal, especially in terms of cost. Um, but hopefully there can be some sort of pushback against GPs doing this. It's a
Yeah.
difficult situation though, because if you're dealing with a case of like several professionals at a clinic either refusing to do so for political reasons or claiming they don't have the training or feigning that they don't have the training or whatever, it's a difficult thing to deal with. I can imagine situations of people just changing GP regularly, which isn't ideal if you're trying to maintain continuity of care and treatment, right?
When it comes to like the abortion debate or the assisted dying debate, I understand why a doctor might not want to opt in for being a part of that as a treatment plan, right? Because, if you're a doctor who performs medical abortions, that is a
Mm.
career path that you have to choose. GPs don't perform them, right? Random people, random doctors and random surgeons don't perform them. It's a specific doctor that you go to, so you choose that path. When it comes to assisted dying, obviously we don't know how that's going to work out, but I know in pretty much every single country around the world, doctors are not obliged to have to take part in that treatment, and I understand that. But when it comes to this, if you're signing up to be a GP, your job is generalist. You're going to be
Yeah.
accepting to treat literally everyone. I don't think you should be able to refuse on beliefs. I don't know if that's problematic. Am I missing something? I don't know. Because if we're allowing people to do this based on simple beliefs, what then, obviously, under law, stops people from denying other people types of care based on their beliefs too? If you're signing up to be a generalist, I don't really think you have a right to say no. It just doesn't simply make sense to me at all that a GP should be able to refuse this type of care. And I feel like it's almost like this Christian centricness that we have in this country, right? That if this, imagine, can you imagine the Daily Mail headline if any other religion, or particularly people from certain religions in the NHS, started denying people certain types of care based on their belief? Can you imagine what type of headlines we would have then? There'd be outcry. But because we live in this Christian centric country, that somehow we're just accepting, or many people are accepting, that a generalist can deny people care. It just doesn't make sense to me. Am I getting anything wrong there?
No, I don't think so. If it was the case that, say, Muslim GPs were denying people certain treatments because it was out of line with their faith, there would be a massive uproar and probably a scare campaign that got completely out of control over it. That's not to say we want that level of hysteria, but we want just and respectable treatment of trans people. It's not asking much. It really isn't.
It's not asking much at all. Can you imagine as well? Like, let's think of Catholics, right? There
Mm.
are many Catholics out there who don't even believe in simple birth control. What world would we be living in if all the Catholic GPs around the country just started saying, "Oh, you want to come to me to get birth control? You want the pill? You even want free condoms?" And like GPs start saying no to stuff like that, it would be unthinkable. So
Yeah.
why are we allowing GPs to deny people this type of care? I think the thing that frustrates me the most is, like, I wouldn't say, obviously, I would never say I'm willing to accept it if it was a new patient, because I'm not, because everyone's entitled to their healthcare. But a specific part of the changes with the CAS review is that they wanted to specifically not stop people who were already on existing treatment from getting treatment. That was a specific part of the changes. And the fact that people can just suddenly just start denying care. I mentioned earlier the post that I saw on Reddit. I think it was just Transgender UK, the Reddit page, where somebody was describing that they've been on these drugs for 17 years, and then they had to ring around. They tried finding other GPs, and no one would accept them. It just simply is absolutely shocking. But again, this has come from the rhetoric that's built up, right, from over the last few years. It's the culture wars, it's the fake lies about children having, breasts chopped off at the age of 12. Almost every story out there which has been sensationalized is mostly provably false or massively misinformed. But what I'm scared about is that, okay, there's a light has now been shined on this story. Is something actually going to be done about it? Because our LGBTQ health minister, Wes Streeting, who has gone from ally to fucking enemy over the last few months in terms of his community really pisses me off. He said in that famous interview, "Oh, a few years ago I would have just said, yeah, trans woman's a trans woman, and now I've spoken to people and it's got a lot more complicated." If this was any other under any other Labour government and it wasn't West Street, I might actually have hope they might make a change and get on top of this. But with West Streeting, I don't have any fucking hope at all. I don't know about you.
Not without a great deal of pressure on him and on this government. Fortunately, we have seen that pressure does work, and that there is hope in kind of protest around the government. I know it's kind of an obvious point that Labour hasn't done the right thing regarding Gaza, for example, but the protest did force them to make certain concessions,
Yeah.
which have been meaningful but not enough, let's say. Like I'm thinking of the restrictions on arms. Not enough, but something, and it shows that protest works. The same is true in this case. If enough people kick off about this, ultimately there could be a shift, but there has to be that battle. Because you look at West Streeting, he is purely responding to the culture war and its narratives. He's acting opportunistically. Well, if he's put on the spot and pressured a bit more from the other direction, he may shift.
Potentially. I think what we need to do is finally cash in a few coins with all these companies who have been, riding on the back of, we're LGBTQ friendly, we love Pride, hi gay, and all of these companies who love riding on that bandwagon and dab floats at Pride. This is the
Yeah.
time for them to do something. There is a moment, the community is in need. Do you just want to put the rainbow flag in your logo for a month during the year? Or do you actually want to do something about it? So, just even by saying this, I'm going to contact some of these companies. I'm going to ask them. I will contact their press offices and say to them, what are you doing about this? Because you love waving that rainbow flag. Are you actually going to do something about it now? So, I'm going to write that on my notes after this episode. And I would encourage anybody else to do so. So the next time you see a company waving around the pride flag, telling everybody how inclusive they are, ask them if they are standing up for the T in LGBTQ, because it doesn't seem like a lot of people are right now. Yeah, breathe after that one for a second. This gets me very angry. Thank you, Josh. We will move on to the next part. I need to shake off after that one. I'll write that on my notes. I will be contacting companies after this. That is a promise. But before we move on, if you are enjoying this live show, make sure you hit the like button. As it's good for the algorithm. We need to get ourselves out there. We need to reach more people. You can also share the content, let people know about Turn Left. You can also support us financially by heading over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can donate to us either monthly or a one-off donation. Our goal is to one day be paid for the work that we do and grow into a full-blown media organization. So thank you. If you can contribute, please do. If you can't, just keep watching. Do we have any comments? Stanley Beckett, interesting. An ex account that follows no one clearly isn't and is really smear up. Yeah, that was my initial thoughts. I think it's really good to speculate with strong evidence, but also not conclude, because we just simply don't know. There are many people who are the enemy of the ICC. Russia, things in Sudan right now are getting investigated. There are so many people out there who are at the ICC, but obviously, right now under the spotlight, Israel obviously would benefit the most from this. So maybe one day we'll find out. I don't know. But I don't like conspiracy. I just like speculation. And I will leave it at that. But maybe one day we'll find out. Hopefully. Jacqueline, sometimes I worry that by the time we wait for the facts to come out, it could be way too late. Yeah, this is it. It really is, Jacqueline. It really, really is. This is the sad thing. This is why I was, moaning about the ICC arrest warrants, because that could really put a nail in the foot of Israel, and specifically Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. it could really hamper them. It could really hamper their efforts. But we just have delay after delay on those arrest warrants. And part of that is the UK government. I'm happy that Labour withdrew the previous government's pause on their legal opinion to the court, so it could go forward. But they could have done it sooner. They waited weeks. That's a delay. So that's still on Keir Starmer's head and his Attorney General. And then we've got all the other actors. Germany are defending Israel at the International Criminal Court, and so are dozens of other countries and organizations. And, once the dust has settled, whether that's 6 months or 6 years from now, history won't be kind on these people. But all we have to do, we have to keep the pressure up. You have to keep contacting your MPs. Every time you see a horrible article about Israel and the horrible things that they're doing, keep sending it to your MP. Even if your MP is supportive of Palestinians, just keep sending it. Keep adding that pressure. They do actually care about what's in their inbox. So all we can do is keep up the pressure. Edward, hello. Even if Khan is guilty of anything, it doesn't let Israel off the hook. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But obviously, as we know, if this is a smear campaign by Israel, and that's big if, again, we don't know, we can't conclude that, it could discredit him. In the article of the Wall Street Journal that we did mention earlier, they've specifically said, I think it was in the second paragraph, and this was the editorial board. This wasn't a opinion piece by somebody who works for the Wall Street Journal. This was the entire editorial board in the second paragraph of their article saying he's anti-Israel and he's left. Despite the fact that they ignore in this article that Karim Khan, even though he is a British Muslim, has gone after other extremist Islamic groups. He seems pretty objective to me. We'll see what happens with it, Edward. Jacqueline, the fact that there's this ICC prosecution against Israel on a really, really serious charge, and the UK government is still willing to do business with Israel is absolutely shameful. Yeah, you're right, Jacqueline, because I'm happy that, again, that the UK withdrew their pause, their legal opinion that they could have submitted to support Israel. Under the international law, I don't know which one, so I'm not going to quote the exact one. Not only are you supposed to support the courts in their decisions, that if you believe that there is a genocide going on, or international war crimes or international crimes against humanity are being perpetuated right now, it's your obligation to actually do as much as possible to stop them. So sitting back is actually against international law. And the Tory government actually set up a framework to actually economically and militarily tie us to Israel over the next few years. The plan is already in place, and the plan is happening every day. This was set up by the Tory government, and when those Labour MPs put up that motion in Parliament, was it last week or the week before, led by Richard Bergen, it specifically says in there, we do not want this closer relationship to go ahead with Israel, because the UK government, the Labour government, haven't stopped the establishment of this framework from going ahead. So we're tying ourselves actually closer to Israel, which is very disappointment. But just remember to boycott. Remember to boycott. Edward, denying people HRT is disgusting. There's a long history of medical profession being absolutely shitty and complicit in oppression at all levels. Yeah, you're absolutely right, especially when it comes to LGBTQ healthcare, especially when it comes to women's healthcare, especially when it comes to the healthcare of ethnic minorities too. There's so many levels of discrimination, of oppression. And again, what frustrates me with this specific story is that the point of a GP is to be a generalist, not a specialist. They cannot quote the idea of, oh, we don't know enough about this. All they have to do is, I'm on multiple drugs that are sourced from a specialist doctor, but my GP provides me them, and they do bloods for them every year. And all they've got to do is just look at the bloods, make sure they're okay, and keep prescribing more. And if anything's wrong, then they refer you back to the clinic. That is literally their job. That is it, and they're refusing to do it, and it's absolutely disgusting. And I would encourage anybody to, if you're going to be in contact with your GP at any point in time soon, mention this to them and say, I hope you guys aren't doing this, and keep up the pressure. We need to contact our MPs about this, our local elected officials. And I'm hoping soon that a march will be arranged, and I'll definitely be going if there is. And don't forget to harass those companies that wave the fucking rainbow flag. They're the ones who need to be standing up now too. I'm very ranty today. Okay. Didn't some GPs refuse to offer treat with some gay men in the 80s and AIDS epidemic too? I seem to remember hearing stories. Yeah, Vicky. Obviously, to pull onto one story that I always think of when it comes to the AIDS crisis is when Diana famously touched the AIDS patient, because at that point we knew that it couldn't be passed in that way. But even though we had that knowledge, people still refused to touch them like they were lepers. There were lots of doctors who yeah, they didn't treat people, and it is still, even to this day, still quite stigmatized in many ways. Even though if you are HIV positive and you're on treatment and your viral load is undetectable, you don't pose a risk to anyone. Obviously, if you're going to the doctors, if you're going to have surgery, if you're going to A&E, any of these situations, it's important to tell doctors that you have this. But there are loads of other situations, even to this day, where people have to disclose their HIV status, even though it's not medically relevant. And a lot of this still happens today, and it still goes on. And I feel like the battle for trans healthcare, unlike the AIDS epidemic, that progressed, it got better. This seems to be going backwards. And I don't know what to do about that. We've never really been in these positions before. Usually things move forward, and when you're young, you naively think things are going to continue moving forward. And then you realize that they don't. And that's what's happening now. And that's why we need to keep up the pressure and keep fighting. And hopefully, transgender people will get the healthcare that they should be entitled to. We will move on to the next story. Bit different. So you've probably come across Jubilee videos at some point, and if that doesn't sound familiar, don't worry, you'll see in a moment. If you haven't, here's a little example of what a Jubilee video is.
What's frightening to me is that you're equating some minor inconveniences in your privileged life to
Why would you assume my life is privileged?
Unsupported.
But why would you assume my life is privileged, though? You don't know my life. I mean, I don't say that about you. Why would you assume my life is privileged?
I'm privileged.
Okay, that's fine, but why would you assume my life is privileged?
For one, you're a man.
You know, most people commit suicide are men. Most people who work in dangerous workplaces are men. Most people who fight in war are men.
And who set that system up?
Men.
What's frightening to me is...
So I do love that clip, and hopefully you might kind of recognize Jubilee now, because that clip is one of those clips that just goes viral like once a month on social media. But they're really popular. They're on TikTok. They're all across social media, and they create lots of content. And they often go like very, very viral. You've probably seen Jubilee clips without even knowing it. They do these group-based videos, and it can be anything from guess who the black person is when everyone's blindfolded. If that's what you like, that's what you like. They've done videos where it's like guess who the millionaire is, and lots of fun videos which are easy to watch. But over the years, they've done more and more controversial and topical roundtable debates, like can Israelis and Palestine see eye to eye, where they actually got Israelis and Palestinians around a table to talk. And they've done one which is men's activists versus feminists. A lot of these clips create many different debates where people are, often actually quite cordial and actually often find middle ground on topics, settle misunderstandings, and sometimes walk away with a different perspective. However, more recently, they've been doing a lot of these political roundtables that just, I don't know, they tickle me the wrong way. So recently it involves a 1v25 style. Like a month ago, they did a can one woke teen survive 20 Trump supporters, which was then followed by a can 25 liberal college students outsmart one conservative. And then just this week, if you haven't already seen it on social media, it's Ben Shapiro versus 25 Kamala Harris voters. Let me quickly show you what I'm about to moan about.
Why, hello there. I'm Ben Shapiro, and I'm co-founder of The Daily Wire and host of The Ben Shapiro Show. And today, I'm surrounded by 25 Kamala Harris supporters. My first claim is Kamala Harris's attempts to put DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of her policies is destructive. How's it going, dude?
I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The reason I'm talking about this, and maybe I'm just complaining, maybe I'm just a Karen or a Ken, but these types of conversations can be, I think, way more damaging than they can be helpful or productive. Because like this got released less than 24 hours, sorry, less than 48 hours ago, and it's garnered like tens of millions of views. The setup is here's a bunch of know-it-all, eager young liberal college students who have to literally play musical chairs to get their turn on a topic they might not have prepared for. And I think it almost sets them up to fail. And they don't get the time that they need to fully hash out an actual argument, which allows the experienced debater, Ben Shapiro, who knows the questions and knows what to prepare for beforehand. And the young progressive people come across messy, and it buys into the idea of like, woke lefty young people who can, who can't actually present a good argument. Now, don't get me wrong. Many of these young debaters have huge platforms. You might recognize a few of them. They're very well prepared, and some of them get really good at formulating arguments. But I want to zoom out a second and look at like the online debate space, because I think it's a bit unhealthy. I think it thrives on opposition, on disagreement, on polarization. So therefore, like the space is incentivized to actually not come together and not find the middle ground, to not actually make any progress, despite the fact that that's what they appear to pretend to be doing, right? And their entire economy of like online debating, the space thrives on shock moments, which on both sides they're incentivized to bring people on who are even more shocking, or to platform people so they can own them and search out those like viral moments to get clicks and get the cash. And I don't know. I think it's dangerous to sometimes platform some of these people, and I want to show you
legitimately don't see how like you as a woman could stand for someone that's overturned Roe v. Wade, rescinding the right to get an abortion back to the state, leading like
I think it should be state by
65,000
state
victims of sexual abuse. Okay, why?
That's fine. I think if everyone in a state wants something, go ahead and have it.
So if everyone in Alabama wanted slavery back, you'd be okay with that?
Sure. If everyone in the state wants it, go ahead. What do I give a shit?
All right. Well, let's go next topic.
Well,
It's like these questions are so funny
about
because
that?
these questions
No,
are
we're
so
not gonna
funny
talk
because
about that.
they're meant
So
to trap
I
you.
just-
out.
I'm getting
I don't
nervous.
care.
I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
You understand that was the same argument that the Confederacy upheld, right? So do you wish that the Confederacy won the war because according to your worldview, the Union impeded upon the state's ability to legislate?
No, but it's
as
an
they liked?
irrelevant argument.
No, so you're glad that the Union won?
This is what I'm saying. All these things are it's like you're phrasing it in a way where it's like I could be like, yes, obviously no. Like I'm not some like psychopath. Like I live in LA. I'm not some crazy right-wing person.
So now you're saying it's
But
psychotic
if everyone in the state wants something, sure, let them have it.
Okay, so you agree with the
No one's
Confederacy.
voting to bring back slavery now. Oh,
So
cool. So
I
10
just
crazy
want to
people in a
clarify.
state?
You agree with the Confederacy?
No.
But the Articles of the Confederation.
All right, we
were
have to
states'
move on.
rights.
We got limited time here.
These gotcha moments don't work on me. I'm not a like
Okay,
it's
Emily,
not
don't
gonna
get
work.
don't get upset.
Okay.
Don't get upset.
And
We're
then-
just
No,
getting
it's
started.
just like dumb because this is like what liberals do, and it's so.
I know. Okay,
annoying.
so
It's
here we're
very
gonna move on.
lowbrow.
We're gonna move on. We're gonna move on.
So if everybody wants slavery and they vote it in, that's fine, according to her. Now, I realize that I'm almost like playing into the same thing I'm almost rallying against, right? That we're showing content of a person. Now, what she said is shocking. And this is the type of discourse, and these are the types of people that get attention, right? They get attention across all platforms, and people love putting these type of people on camera so they can get owned or destroyed, and they can make those quick moments that get them money. But that one clip of her has now made her famous, and yeah, I'm adding to it too. But instead of simply reacting to it and being like, "Oh, what a crazy girl! Oh my god, have you seen this?" It's giving the person traffic, and that person still gets attention and a larger platform and more money to continue their harm. And it almost reminds me of like, this is kind of how Andrew Tate came up. You're not necessarily debating, but it was actually that space, that debate space, that discussion space where it was like, oh, we have to get on the most shocking type of person who's going to say the most shocking type of things because they're going to get us loads of clicks. They're going to get us loads of reviews. Because I remember as soon as Andrew Tate started coming up, he was literally on everyone's podcast. And look at the monster that created. Josh, Not a typical news story, more of a, discussion and a rant. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Is the online debate space useful, or is it damaging and platforming dangerous people?
It can be useful, but so often isn't. And there are big limits to debate, I think, because ultimately, yeah, you can have a discussion that just goes nowhere between two different perspectives, right? You can have a meaningful discussion where everyone just agrees. That's also not necessarily very helpful. And you can have situations where people will change their minds. And that last one is the really rare one, of course. In the case of Ben Shapiro, this is really his bread and butter. He's been doing this kind of thing for his entire pundit career, really. And he's now a man in his 40s debating college students, which is pretty questionable in itself, I think. You'd think he'd grow out of this sort of thing eventually. From what I've seen of this is that the format is probably what is drawing the viewers at this point, because he's got the strange circle, the 25 people around him, and they're all vying for their moment with Ben. So there is a kind of infotainment aspect to all of this. It's not really about the debate so much as it is about his personality, and of course a certain kind of like culture war politics that we've already alluded to, right? And I think all of the issues that are being debated is stuff like diversity, abortion, and so on. It's very predictable where this is all going. It's too advanced for Fox News, though, I suspect.
Yeah. People, I get pushback when I say this. I don't like Ben Shapiro. I don't like anything that he says. I don't like anything that he does. But if you actually see him debate a person who is at his level in terms of like age and experience, he's not a terrible debater. Like he has skill. But what annoys me obviously is that he does do very good in this type of format, because even though these young people, who many of them, like there's one guy there called Parker who's got like literally millions of followers on TikTok and does daily debates for hours where he gets 10,000 concurrent viewers. Like he knows what he's doing, but at the same time, there is a level of experience obviously that Ben brings to it, which is outside that TikTok space. And if you actually watch the entire thing, which I didn't do, I just watched various clips, you can see where they're weak and where he's strong. And I just feel like so many topics come up throughout. One of them is like Gaza's a genocide, and it's like it's a minute and a half of discussion on that topic. And I feel like in these, Jubilee clipped that a little bit, and it's frustrating because that requires such a nuanced conversation. Sometimes it doesn't, but in this type of space, it is just about the clicks. It's just about the framing. It's almost like trivializing it. I don't know, in a way, gamifying it almost in a way. I don't know. It just really annoys me. Some of these roundtables I've seen are really good. That's why I showed the clip of that woman saying who set this system up to that young man, because I feel like it's a powerful clip and I think it's useful. But this gamification of such a pivotal time, whether it's what's going on in the Middle East with the prospect of Donald Trump literally getting into power, and we're doing trivial 1 minute mini debate that get lots of views. And I don't know, maybe again I'm being too pessimistic and being too much doom and gloom, but like we're on the edge of something. I think this is where this passion for this specific topic is coming from, where it's like we're on the precipice of something really big and dark, and this is what people are talking about, and this is people having conversations. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. The issues that are being dealt with are incredibly important to millions of people, and yet they're being kind of, as you say, gamified, or it's being turned into a kind of game show, right? And it's obviously, it's not to help any of the people involved, and certainly not to give serious voice to the opposition. I mean, it's also interesting that Ben Shapiro, whenever he's challenged seriously, well, on several occasions where he's challenged seriously, he will just lose his rag, as we saw with Andrew Neil, which was very ironic given that Neil is such a reactionary. But I do wonder where all this stuff is going at the same time. It does seem like the US kind of ecology of right-wing social media, right-wing alt media is pretty powerful these days, sadly. Never mind the mainstream. But the left is also out there.
Yeah, the left obviously does work on outrage and shock too, sometimes in the same ways, sometimes in different ways. I just feel like we've moved away, not completely, but in many ways away from genuine, good, and deep discussion on topics. I feel like with this current format that is continuing, there isn't really any room for anything bigger and anything deeper. People's attention spans are absolutely just in the bin. So I'm sure Jubilee is incentivized to make content like this so they can make clips just like this, because I'm sure when they were planning that, they were like, okay, they can have 1.5 minutes each because then it can be clipped for social media, right? Like that's how these things are planned. But I think it's almost like, I could go on a capitalistic rant, but it's what's making the money, it's what's getting the views, and they will follow that regardless of what damage I think it causes to the discourse, without even then thinking that they are doing any damage to it, because it's getting views and it's getting positive feedback. I don't know. I could actually rant about this all day, but we are limited for time. So I will quickly move on to our last story of the day. So Keir Starmer has hinted at potential tax increases for people who own shares and assets, stating that they don't align with his definition of working people. So this comes after Labour's manifesto promised not to raise taxes on working people, but the exact definition of working people has remained unclear. Let's watch.
Is working in the way that people are entitled to see from their public services.
Prime Minister, are you a working person?
Well, I would define a working person as somebody who goes out and earns their living, usually paid in a sort of monthly check. But I think that's obviously very broad. So let me be clear. What I mean, or if you like, who I have in my mind's eye when I make decisions as Prime Minister, are the sorts of working people who go out, work hard, and maybe save a bit of money, but don't have the wherewithal to write a cheque to get out of difficulties if they and their family get into difficulties.
That definition.
Now that's who I have in my mind. People who've got that anxiety, if you like, in the bottom of their stomach, that says, we're doing all right, but should something happen to me and my family, I haven't actually got the wherewithal to get out of that problem. So that's who I have mostly in mind.
The definition is very broad. Who isn't a working person? Who is a person for whom you think taxes should go up?
Well, it is broad, I accept that. But
broad?
No, but when I tell you who's in my mind's eye, which is, and I think everybody watching this will know, whether they're in this category, because you carry in that situation a sort of knot in the bottom of the stomach, which is, if push comes to shove and something happens to me and my family, I can't just get a checkbook out, even though I've maybe got a bit of saving. But they're the people that in a way, I came into politics to try and make sure they had secure jobs, didn't have the anxiety of public services not working, and felt genuinely better off with better opportunities. That's what I have in my mind's eye.
Okay, so for someone who works but gets their income from assets as well, such as shares of property, are they a working person?
Well, they wouldn't come within my definition.
So their taxes could go up?
Yeah, I mean, you can probably give me any number of examples. No, you're tagging a second question to the first, which is you're asking me for a definition of who's a working person, and then you're making assumptions about what the tax might be in relation to.
The point is, we're running out of time, but I could go through fuel duty. If you're driving a van,
you could.
You're a working person and you might put fuel duty up.
You could go through that exercise, or you could, ensure that people hear from me who I have in my mind's eye. People watching this will know whether they're in that group or not. Those people who work hard, are anxious about whether they can make ends meet, and know that should something happen to them and their family, they can't write a checkbook to get out of the problem. I'm really concerned about them, and the decisions I make are, because politics for me is about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make your decisions. I'm not ideological. I have those people in my mind's eye. The reason it matters, Prime Minister, and the reason...
You know what, I feel like he was a bit more, not confident, but a bit more sure of himself in terms of who he is talking about. It's not perfect, but I think it is nice to hear a bit more of a distinction of who a working person is. I feel like it could be simplified though, as a person, generally just a person who works month to month, pay to pay, right? And not people who just earn money off of massive investments and assets or historical wealth. I feel like it could just be simplified down to that 2 sentences. Maybe it's Beth Rigby. I feel like she's a bit interrupty sometimes and you can't get everything out. But I don't know. I'm a bit happier with that position, but it could still be a little bit better. We'll get there. Maybe. We'll see. But the debate has been growing after ministers declined to rule out increasing national insurance for employers in the upcoming budget, and tax experts suggest that this would eventually burden employees through lower wages. We don't want that. So he refrained from giving a direct answer on upcoming changes in the budget, but implied that it's possible this means inheritance tax and capital gains tax, which apply to estates and the sales of assets. They could be in the firing line, but currently capital gains tax applies to personal items worth over £3,000, second homes and non-ISA held shares. Downing Street then later clarified that people with small amounts of savings in stocks and shares are still considered working people, still fighting on the definition of what a working person is. But Starmer was focusing on those who primarily earn money from assets. So Chancellor Rachel Reeves hasn't ruled out any tax increases either, stating that tough decisions are needed, the usual, in the face of the £40 billion funding shortfall in the national finances. And Reeves is expected to rewrite the government fiscal rules. I hate that word, fiscal rules, in the upcoming budget to allow an increase in borrowing for the public investment, potentially by £50 billion. Josh, how are we feeling about all this? Do you think you've got a clearer definition of what working people is under Keir Starmer's definition, or is it still a bit too loose?
It's clearer than I expected. I'll put it like that. It's still somewhat elastic and loose, as you say, but that's kind of to be expected. Labour has a long history of this type of rhetoric, these types of elastic categories that are very helpful to them in terms of rhetoric and selling policies. You know, think about just about managing, the so-called jams, think about hard-working families, that kind of thing. And working people is an interesting category because it doesn't say working class necessarily, but it does imply something about your attitude to work, or at least what you're doing day to day, right? I think it was a fairly, for Starmer, it was fairly clear in terms of a definition. You know, the exclusion of people who live off of assets. You know, because there are people out there who live off of dividends and will have a tiny salary, say of even £10,000, which they'll pay no tax on. That's like their pocket money, really. And the real money is coming from dividends, and that could be, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. It could be hundreds of thousands of pounds a month in some extreme cases. And those are the people that he's excluding from his definition, because they're probably going to raise capital gains tax, or they're going to tweak it in some way, or they're going to do something around, you know, wealthy private pensioners, that kind of thing. Maybe inheritance tax. There's all kinds of things that they're probably been working on and considering in the budget. Or national insurance for employers, that's another one. There's a long list, basically, of how they can stick to their quote-unquote pledge about not taxing working people more than they already have. Of course, this is partly because tax thresholds on working class people have already risen. They have they've not risen, they have the so-called fiscal drag. So as wages have increased due to inflation and to some extent other factors, like the union victories we've seen and so on, people get dragged into a higher tax bracket that they wouldn't have historically. And
yeah, because in theory by now, it should have moved up by a few £1,000s. We should be somewhere in the region of, I think one report that I read said we should be, that the tax-free amount should be around £15,000 right now, maybe even 16. But because they haven't moved it up, we've, you know, being dragged behind. And that was actually part of the reason why every time we saw the headlines of the Tories having the highest tax burden since World War II, it wasn't necessarily just because they were taxing us higher, it was because of fiscal drag. And I feel like we're not going to see any movement in any of that anytime soon.
No, it's too much revenue for the exchequer.
Yeah. Maybe in 4.5 years when there's an election coming up, that's when they like to start lowering taxes. But I was laughing to myself just a second ago because of inheritance tax. I can't remember what the data is. It's either somewhere like 3 to 5% of people it actually affects. But for some reason, it's one of those things that's like highly emotive that, you will literally get, my working class dad who doesn't have very much money, right? Doesn't have very much assets. And he'll turn around and go, oh, they're going to have taxes when we're dead. And it's like, no, you and 97% of the country are exempt from that tax. But for some reason, people have this idea that it somehow affects everyone because obviously they haven't died yet. So, the family hasn't experienced that. It affects literally the richest people in the country, but people get very emotive about it. And I just find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's because the right has spun narratives around taxation very effectively, and inheritance tax has been a very easy target because they immediately had the label death tax for it. And when you're talking about these things, there often isn't the nuances and the details about how income tax brackets work, let's say, or the actual thresholds. It's all very complex and dry stuff, so it's easy to have an emotive argument about it. Yeah, and the right's been very effective about shaping the way we think about tax, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. For some reason, despite the fact of 14 years of Tories and high taxes, people, even after these 14 years, still associate Labour with higher taxes than Tories, despite the fact that we just had the highest taxes since World War II. But people have already forgotten that. And it will probably continue like that. Obviously, when it comes to the budget, what date is it on again? Did I mention that in what I just said? When's the budget?
The
30th. I'm sure whoever's doing the show next week will have a very nice and long and lengthy show. We can stop speculating. We can stop talking about things that could happen or couldn't happen. I feel like this has been a bit damaging for Labour waiting this long to actually do a budget. They could have done one much earlier. And all the speculation is just, if you literally look at every newspaper every single day for the last 2 months, it's almost every day budget speculation. And it's just been, I don't know, really damaging. Will that be forgotten after the budget? I don't know.
I think it's been a mixed bag for Labour. We'll see how we won't really know until the day, to be fair. I think some of it they've probably played it this way because they think, oh yes, well if we can get them speculating about capital gains tax for 6 weeks, that means they're not going to be talking about things like the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah.
Because the budget will come and go, people will get hepped up about it, and then the news cycle will move on to something else very quickly. Whereas winter is coming, it's going to be the NHS crisis. They're going to be dealing with that for months.
That was a purposeful Game of Thrones reference. Just checking.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I just look like a crazy person laughing at a camera.
Couldn't help myself.
Winter is coming. Hopefully there won't be any dead things coming after us, but we'll see.
Yeah, that'd be a bit much.
Right, we ran over. I will have to end it here. But thank you so much, Josh. Actually, can we bring on Josh just for one more second? Josh, where can we find you? Where can people follow you?
You can follow me on X, formerly Twitter. My handle is at JT White Noise. And I can be read at thebattleground.eu. I write twice a month there. I sometimes do a bit of podcasting and commission and edit work as well. So feel free to get in touch.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. So that is the end of tonight's show. Thank you to everyone who joined in. And again, thank you, Josh, for being a fantastic guest. But remember, if you haven't already, then like the stream, like the video, if you're watching this on playback, as it does help with the infamous algorithm. So if you want to also see us grow, you can donate to us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can support us either monthly or with a one-off donation and help us become that full-time media organization that we've been dreaming of. I am Lewis. See you next time.
Patreon.com, Turn Left Media. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn Left.